in 2016. Shows that mineral sector's contribution to export the same year stood at 11.16 billion naira, representing 3.38% of the 330.01 billion from the non-oil sector and 0.13% of total export of 8.53 trillion naira. Federal government got 4.547 billion naira, states and local government got 2.306 billion naira and 1.778 billion naira, respectively. In another development, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, says it remains committed to restoring stability in the world oil market. Secretary General of OPEC says price volatility is due to anxiety ahead of the 14-member oil producer group's next meeting in Vienna in December. Oil prices slumped to the lowest level in more than 8 months on Wednesday, extending losses from a 7% plunge in the previous session. And next is the graphic representation of Wednesday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
All right, thank you very much, Kunle, for the business package. Next for us now is a review of the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Bayo Atoyebi, our newspaper review is here. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Gideon. Good morning.
Bayo, good to see you. Yeah. That's right. Well, let's begin with the Punch newspaper and indeed the Daily Trust, because the focus of their lead stories are the same. So we'll take a look at the lead story for Punch, and it comes with a kicker. Governors to Labour expect sacking if we must pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. That's the lead story for the Punch newspaper. Expect sacking if we must pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. And for the Daily Trust, it's also the lead story, as I said. Choose between 30,000 and job cuts, governors tell Labour. So those are the two lead stories for both papers. And then, Kyrian, I think you have similar headlines as lead stories.
Yes, and on the Daily Sun newspaper, also captured it this way. Governors Forum speaks. States will go bankrupt if governors pay 30,000 naira wage. It's on page 6. And of course, the New Telegraph also has that as the main headline. It says, we will downsize to pay 30,000 naira minimum wage. The governors are saying this with the two writers. Says the states will go bankrupt to implement new wage. NGF, that's the Governors Forum, demands review of revenue allocation formula. Ambode, El-Rufai, Omahi, others to meet Buhari. It's on page 2.
All right, Bayo, let's discuss that story first before we go to others.
The minimum wage thing has been a running story, and it will continue until the challenge of the national new minimum wage is resolved. Yesterday, the Governors Forum met, and the chairman, Governor Abdulaziz Yari, briefed the media. He says that the aim of the Governors Forum now is to put together another committee to meet with the president, and they are giving conditions. If they must pay the 30,000 minimum wage, then first and foremost, Labour will have to agree to downsizing of the workforce. Secondly, the federal government will also have to agree to review the national revenue allocation formula, which is taking a substantial part, 52%. It will have to reverse that in favor of the states. And the governor added, their own proposal of 22,500 was not considered at all because it was submitted late. And what they are now saying is that the 27 states of the federation out of the 36 could not pay 18,000 minimum wage as at 2017, and that was why they had to resort to support from the federal government. And he said, so as it is now, if 30,000 is to be adopted, it is only Lagos State that can pay. And the governor is arguing that even River State cannot pay. And he says Lagos State has a wage bill of about 7 billion. And if they accept to pay 30,000 as a minimum wage, it means the wage bill for Lagos State is going to be 13 billion. And that is quite substantial. So what they are suggesting now is that they now have to go back and work everything. But he's also putting forward argument that those who are contending that governors are riding jets and living a luxurious life, he said that life is very necessary. And he added that that's what they consume there, if added to salary, will still not be able to pay the 30,000 minimum wage. Meanwhile, the labor too is not keeping quiet. The Trade Union Congress, led by Boboye Kegama, has said that as far as they are concerned, they are given a deadline of December 2018 for the implementation of the 30,000 minimum wage. And they are lamenting that the tripartite committee has agreed. All they are waiting is for Mr. President to send the bill to the National Assembly to be passed into law. They lamented that civil servants, the engine room of government, is the worst paid in the public domain. Their counterparts in the other agencies have had their emolument reviewed upwards several years ago. So those are the challenges.
Now there is something to worry about, based on what some governors did say some weeks ago with respect to the minimum wage. Some say we can pay anything. Some say we can pay 30,000.
They didn't say we can. They say we will pay. It means that if the pushing comes to shoving comes to pushing, they will have no choice but to pay. But they are not paying with convenience.
We have seen these headlines and say, I can pay, I can pay. You see the government should have put their house together, because this comment made, they were on daily newspapers, that I can pay 30. Some say I can pay 45. It's all on daily. So I wonder why the confusion on the part of the government. Now they're coming out again with another position that is, of course, fueling the entire situation. Anyway, let's see how it pans out.
That's why Kingsley had always said the capacity to pay.
All right, let's take a look at other stories, this time from the Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate, which is quite busy, autumn to name primary school after rape victim, Ochanya. Details on page 10. Bayo, you remember the Ochanya young lady, the teenager, who was unfortunately raped to death. Senate alleges fresh 1.15 billion naira illegal withdrawals from NLNG accounts. Details on page 2. APC primaries, anti-Oshomole protesters storm ICPC. And then you also have Obasanjo calls for a constitutional amendment to allow youths to participate in politics. I thought that was taken care of by the Not Too Young to Run bill.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Now, 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate of the Punch. Faulty microphones. Reps adjourned for 3rd time in 1 week. That's page 10. And NECO releases new timetable for November-December examinations. And the photograph on the front page of the Punch newspaper shows pupils who are taking lessons at an IDP camp at New Kushingoro, it's in Abuja, on Wednesday. Of our bank robberies, suspects arraigned, counsel withdraws, page 8. And federal government's $2.86 billion euro bond oversubscribed by $6.6 billion. That's according to the ministry. And local and international investors, ARIC and Aero. And right at the foot of the front page, 3 stories. Strike. Federal government, ASU meet today, and union tackles fire me. That's the governor of Ekiti State. Family accuses Lagos Hospital of causing asthmatic patient's death. And ICPC to arraign sex for Mark professor on Monday. That's the professor who was fired from Bafin University.
Okay, let's just run through some other headlines on the Daily Sun. But besides the nameplate of the Daily Sun, alleged fraud, ICPC to probe Oshomole is on page 4, with their rider pledges to look into petitions as APC dismisses protest. Now, 1,110 dead as cholera ravages 29 states. It's on page 6. And, of course, the photograph you see there is women and children during a medical outreach organized by the Nigerian Army Corps of Artillery, Kachia, Kaduna State. That was yesterday. And now, below that, Deputy Sokoto Deputy Governor resigns to contest against Tambuwal, his principal. It's on page 39. Bio.
Yes, there is a very interesting development. Nigeria may be on the verge of producing its own helicopter by the end of next year. The National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NASENI, has given it this indication. They had a presidential directive to produce a made-in-Nigeria helicopter through reverse engineering technology. And this process, reverse engineering technology, requires the agency to liaise with agencies that are manufacturers of the helicopter. It's a way of partnering, understudying, copying, and modifying to domesticate and manufacture the helicopter. Before now, NASENI had actually produced drones which have been used. But the executive secretary of the agency, Professor Mohammed Sani Haruna, says that they are working with the National Agency for Civil Aviation to ensure that the safety and the precision requirement of aviation are not compromised, so that it will be of high precision. Yes,
actually, I was privileged to cover an event organized by NASENI sometime this year, where they presented the first jet engine that was produced. You know, they have other sub-agencies under NASENI. Now, they did that with SEDI, you know, Science Development Equipment Institute in Enugu, in collaboration with other engineers, you know, who work under NASENI. So that was when they presented a jet engine, which they, of course, tested, although it didn't fly, you know, but it was tested for people to see the possibility of going further, advancing on that. So this issue of producing a helicopter is a further development, yes.
The other story, though, that I'd like to draw attention to is the Federal High Court in Uyo has declared the seat of an Akwa Ibom legislator vacant and directed the State House of Assembly not to recognize him as a member. Honorable Idongisien Itwen, he represents Itu constituency, had actually defected from the People's Democratic Party to the All Progressive Congress. And now, before the expiration of his tenure, he now, in a preemptive suit, went to court to stop the speaker from declaring his seat vacant. But eventually, it backfired. The court ruled that Honorable Itwen is to vacate his Itu State constituency seat, and also order is to restrain the speaker of the Akwa Ibom State House of Assembly from recognizing him as a member of the House, and it has also ordered INEC to conduct a by-election. However, Mr. Intua's lawyer has indicated that he's going to appeal the ruling. Consequently, you see that this is the era of migration, defecting from one political party to the other. But Section 68(1)(g) of the Constitution is the basis for which people feel safe to defect, particularly where there is a division within the party and where there's a faction or otherwise. Now, the situation has been that people actually occasion division or faction to justify their defection. So that has been a big challenge, and carpet crossing has become a prelude to general elections in Nigeria.
All right. Bayo, thank you very much. If you were to ask me what the situation is with regard to the jurisprudence on party defection and then what the consequences should be in line with the provisions of the Constitution, my response will be, I don't know. And this is simply because what we have seen since the advent of the Fourth Republic in 1999, those provisions of the Constitution have been observed more in the breach. There appears to be no uniform position on what happens to a party member who is in the legislature, for instance, and then crosses the carpet, you know, to another political party on the alibi, as you have said, of whether contrived crisis within the party or otherwise. And this is in spite of the fact that there are judicial decisions on what should happen. And the conflict, you know, that should occur is not necessarily at the local level, but usually, if you like, at the commanding heights of the political parties. But yet, if you were to go around the country today, as it has been since after 1999, you would find persons who have defected, but who are still retaining their seats.
As a matter of fact, when we describe our level of democracy as being nascent, you know, these are the indices, you know, for us to be sustaining that level of our development democratically. Because from what Kingsley said now, it does seem that, well, we have laws, but are they really strictly adhere to when it comes to political interests and what have you.
So
all right, can we go to the editorial?
Just before we take the editorial, Daily Trust, a couple of stories from the front page of the... We've already taken the lead story, but there are a couple of stories. This is also in the news. Below the nameplate, Nnamdi Kanu court orders forfeiture of 300 million naira bonds. That's page 3. NNPC fires over 80 senior staff. That's on page 6. Where those senior staff who were fired were those who were said to have failed their promotion exams, by the way. And then right below the photograph there on the front page, sex for marks, we already took that. ICPC arraigns ex-OAU lecturer Monday. Shomole should quit politics. That's according to Saraki. That's a rejoinder to what was published yesterday. And then investors seek $73.08 billion in 65 projects.
Okay, can we go to the editorial now? The editorial for today is taken from New Telegraph, and it is on the current ASU strike, finding lasting solutions to varsity strikes. The continued silence of the federal government on the ongoing nationwide strike by ASU that has paralyzed academic activities in government-owned universities across the nation in the last 2 weeks is worrisome. I just took one of the major items here. It is unbelievable that Nigeria's public university system had, in the last 19 years, been shut down for more than 4 years as a result of strikes by ASU, causing colossal damage to the sector. But of course, Bayo has told us a short while ago that action is being taken. That is a meeting scheduled for today to meet with ASU officials.
Yes, there is a meeting scheduled today, but what the editorial is saying that between the year 1999 and this year, 2018, a period of 19 years, if you put together the period that ASU has gone on strike, is equivalent to 4 years. It means that 4 years is almost more than the whole period you require for a student to graduate from the university. That is the quantum of time that has been lost. But the issues that have been in contention have been there since the year 2003, and it has passed from one government to the other since 2009, and has passed from one government to the other. Some measures were reached in 2013, but it was, again, not complied with. And then latest, now you have 2017. In the main, the issues that the ASU are demanding are payment of unearned allowances. They want a sum of about 2 trillion to be paid for maintenance of the university, because that is what the Federal Ministry of Education is saying, that if they are to go by ASU's demand, it means that they would have to provide for 2 trillion for universities' maintenance, and that is more than what is required for the capital budget of the federal government every year. So it's quite substantial. But the other issues that are outstanding include increasing the age of retirement from 65 to 70 years. There was also a NUPEMCO. It's supposed to be a university kind of pension institution that is supposed to be established. These are the issues. But the Federal Ministry of Education say that rather than ASU coming to the negotiating table, they tend to use the carrot or the stick of strike all the time. And negotiations are not achieved on the pages of the newspaper, so they should come to the negotiating table. They are meeting this morning. Let's hope that they will all be wary of the fact that they also are parents and they have children in the universities, and our academics are suffering. All right.
Bayo Atoyebe, thank you very much. Again, this is part of the confusion that we have around in our environment. ASU is on strike. If you take a look at those issues that are the foundation for the current industrial action, and even in the past, they say the federal government is owing them end allowances. Are state governments also owing the state universities end allowances? Is the federal government the employer of the lecturers who are in state universities? Should the federal government be held responsible for what is happening in the state universities? Should state universities join ASU in this kind of strike? Is the federal government the one to provide 2 trillion naira for all universities in the country, federal and state? I mean, these are people that just wake up and then they don't interrogate these issues, and then they just, I mean, carry on. It's an embarrassment
it's been
sometimes.
For so many years, and many governments come and go, and the issue of ASU continues. Now, 2 trillion is on the high side, but I also want to believe, quite frankly, that a part of the problem is neglect by subsequent administrations in the past. I mean, if they have been doing a bit by bit, by now, it would have been taken, because of course there's an issue of infrastructure decay in the university.
And funding. In the meantime, state universities charge fees for their students.
Yes.
Federal universities don't charge fees. So what is the basis for analyzing what the conditions are You also have TED Fund that is pumping money into the university system.
Yeah.
And just this week, you recall, we were discussing what the federal government said, was it this week or last week, that the federal government is now even rehabilitating roads inside the universities. And we said it will get to a time they will fix their toilets and then start changing their bulbs. Bye, Atoyebe. Thanks a lot for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow will be
Okay,
another day.
it's Good Morning Nigeria still. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be taking a look at state police and what the consequences would be or otherwise.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There is no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced.
Change begins with me too. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, to give a perspective to our conversation this morning, let's take this background put together by correspondent Dennis Adegulori.
It is an issue that has been a major topic of discourse in recent times, right from the executive and legislative arms of government down to the ordinary citizen. One cannot deny the security challenges the country has faced, and one can equally not deny the strides made by the Buhari administration in tackling insurgency and criminality in the country over the last few years. However, with the vast land space that is Nigeria and the overstretched Nigerian police, is this a time in the nation's history to vamp up the conversation on state policing?
Nigeria needs community policing at this time. The police can't cover everywhere. I mean, when they have the community police in the community, they can attend to situations even before the police come around. It's very, very essential. We need it.
Yes, community policing is something that is a welcome idea, but it needs to be checkmated so that it will not fall into the hands of the wrong one, because in some state governments use it against their opponents. So if there should be a policy by the National Assembly in order to checkmate it, the criteria for the community police, I think, is a welcome development. So that in our society today, you are seeing so many things that are happening, a lot of insecurity.
It would be very good if community policing can be implemented, most especially the vigilante group, because most especially in a community where I actually live. So I discovered that those guys, those gentlemen, so they always intrude into some houses, rob them, cut away with their things, collect their phone and the rest. Even, especially if you close very late going home, so you discover that you are not going home with confidence until you actually entered your room and lock your door. Even sometimes, even if you are inside your room, there's still no assurance, you understand, until they break.
Community policing is a good idea, but the people, that is the community people, should be trained, because they lack experience in policing. So they should be trained so that they will know the art of policing and what it takes to maintain security.
Everybody should be involved in the security situation. Everybody should be security personnel.
Aside from community policing, I think that the people in the community should be well conscientized. There should be a proper sensitization of the security situation in the area. The people in the community should be involved in it.
There is need to overhaul the entire security system. One, in intelligence gathering, in equipment, then providing the necessary things that will enable the police to perform well, then information gathering, communication between the police and the community, the people. Police should interact with the people. By that means, they can be able to gather information that will be necessary.
The merits and demerits of state policing will be what guests on Good Morning Nigeria will address shortly.
Yeah, Kingsley, the respondents in that Vox Pop are more interested in community policing. Well, the main topic for this morning is state police. And we know that, well, of course, when you establish a state police, that the community will benefit from it. And by extension, because it's bringing the policing closer to the people.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's some conflation there with regard to community policing and state police. But our principal topic for conversation this morning has to do with the arguments for or against state police. Of course, community policing will be a subset of state police. But right away, we have our guest who will elucidate further on this particular issue.
Okay, now joining us in the studio to do justice to this topic is Professor Ohemen Osumbo. I hope I got that correctly. Oseremi Osumbo, a former governor of Edo State and, of course, a senator who represented Edo Central constituency. You are welcome, sir, to this program.
Thank you very much, Killian.
And also with us in the studio is Professor Olu Ogunsake, Professor of Police Studies. It's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right. It's linguistic interference, by the way, by my colleague, Kirian. I'm sure that even Ogunsake said it's Ogunsake. All right, we all fall into that from time to time. Professor Serebe Osumbo is also a professor of law, by the way, and two-term senator and former chairman of the Law Reform Commission. Now, from our Sokoto Network Center, we're being joined by Tambari Yabo. He's a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police. You can see him there in our Sokoto studios. Retired AIG, pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Kinsley.
All right, so let's begin straight away, gentlemen, by asking you to take a look again and review the comments we heard from the respondents to our correspondent who was seeking their views on whether or not to have state police, and then they drifted into community policing. Let's begin with Professor Osumbo.
Well, thank you, Kingsley. I think there is a fundamental issue which we must first place on the table, which is that many Nigerians are not satisfied with the current policing system in Nigeria. And that is why you have people talking about state police or community police. The fundamental issue is that the system of policing under the current arrangement in Nigeria has fallen short of the expectations of many. So there are attempts to fashion out what would be most suitable for us in Nigeria. And this kind of reform has not just started. You will recall that in the First Republic, under the 1960 or 1963 Constitution, there was provision for native authority police, which essentially was to make policing possible at the local level and involving local people. But that was fraught with a lot of abuses. In fact, an elder statesman, Alhaji Tanko Yakasai of Kano, I have read him on a number of occasions decrying the abuse to which he was subjected to under the native authority police system, that he was arrested not less than 44 times. And so he's somebody who is definitely against that kind of arrangement anymore. Again, during the IBB period, Babangida's period, he introduced a policy which is akin to community policing, whereby the police in every state draws its membership, rank and file, predominantly from people from that state, which, again, was an attempt to ensure that policing at the state level is conducted by people who are familiar with the terrain, who are familiar with the environment, who understand the language, who understand the people and their social mores. But again, that was subjected to certain abuses, and I don't think that it was continued with the same fervor that happened under the IBB regime. Now, in the democratic dispensation, there is this urge, this demand, proposals have come to the fore again. And the fundamental issue now is that, and against the background of demands for true federalism, is that in a federal system in which there is a state legislature that is empowered by the Constitution to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of that state ought to have police to enforce the laws passed by its State House of Assembly. The current situation is an anomaly whereby a State House of Assembly passes a law for the state but requires federal police to help enforce and implement that law. Something is wrong with that arrangement. So that is why we have this call for state police. And as you said, the issue of community policing is a subset of that. What that means, essentially, is that you draw on people who are from that community, that environment, and charge them with policing. And many people believe that that would be more effective than bringing personnel who are not familiar with the terrain from different other parts of the country to do the policing. But maybe as we get along in this debate, yes, I can say that we can have an amalgam of the two. You can have a system where there are people from other parts of the state who are conducting the policing also within a state. You can call them the federal police under the federal system, and then the state police with the community police coming up within the state police arrangement.
All right, thank you, Professor Osumbo. We'll return to you. I just picked one of the things that you mentioned here, which has to do with Nigerians not being satisfied, with the current policing system. And Professor Ogunshake, as a nation develops, its challenges grows along the same line with attendant security issues as we experience today in Nigeria. What's your own opinion with respect to our state police system?
Thank you for inviting me here this morning. One of the biggest challenges we have in Nigeria compared to other countries is that we talk so much about these issues and we don't really have a fundamental understanding of what constitutes a state police. And then I think the question we need to be asking our audience is this: why do you need a state police? And most people will tell you that we need a state police because of the increasing crime and all these issues. Then you need to ask yourself another fundamental question: why do we have crime? And the reason you have crime is because of high rate of unemployment that leads to poverty. Hence, you need to start looking at this solution and asking, if it's high rate of employment and poverty, then state police is not your answer. It's governance. If you have a good governance that look into those bits, you cannot come in and introduce state police to deal with your unemployment issues. And then when you now look critically at these two issues, you have state police. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to stem the tide of crime. But if the government fails to regulate, to give employment, we were talking about ASU strike a while back, and you're looking at the issue of graduates taking 8-9 years to finish their education that's supposed to take place in 4 years. You have a mass group of people unemployed. They start deviating to all these 419-year-old bits. Then state police is not going to stop that. You need to create employment first. Then state police can come in. But at this point, Nigeria is not politically ready. We are not matured. Because what we practice in Nigeria is called regional politics, where you have different ethnic groups demanding their rights, and then you want to introduce state police, and then you need to ask yourself another question, because it's through these kind of questions that you get the answer and you start working on the necessary interventions. You need to ask yourself now, imagine that you're a Fulani man living in Abia State, and you have state police comprising of indigenes of Abia State. What is the fate of that Fulani man? These are issues you need to ask yourself. The present issue we have is you have your police council that is made up of all the governors, including the police service chairman and the inspector general of police. The state governors have the opportunity to raise issues. Unfortunately, as I've said on this program on previous occasions, those people don't meet. So you have a structure that doesn't really work, and you want to introduce another one that is not going to work, because the solution you are trying to put forward is not the right solution to deal with the unemployment stuff. The police is not going to help you with your unemployment, it's not going to help you with your poverty, and any indices that we have, when you look at the criminal profiles, you understand that these are the main issues people go into crime. So you cannot ask yourself again and said, state police. And then to mention the bit about community policing, these are two fundamental issues. Community policing is when we have what we call organizational transformation, you have problem solving, you have partnership, you have this set of agreement where there's accountability. But as it is now, we have community policing. It's been around for a long time, it's a philosophy, but the reality is, if you go to state police, you will have the same stuff called community policing. So community policing is a constant. State police is what you're trying to introduce, which is not going to work at this time because of our regionally based government. And if I could just make another point, until you have a Yoruba man who can become a senator in Sokoto State, then you have what you have, a true federalism.
All right, Professor Ogunshake, you've raised a number of points, but I just want to ask you, in countries where you have decentralized policing system, is it that those countries do not have unemployment, do not have crimes? So that you can provide a comparative basis for your proposition.
And some people who have jobs also engage in crime.
Yes, but not the dangerous crimes, not the ones that affect human beings directly. These ones, the crime that your white-collar crime, will affect your economic system. They are both bad. But if I go to Kingsley's question, when you look at UK, when you look at US, when you look at France, when you look at Germany, the system works because the structure is in place to look at inspectorate divisions for police, the criminalists, the data work. Here we don't even look at community policing. You are introducing community policing where houses are not numbered, where the roads are bad, and you expect police response. The same thing is going to go to the state police. We need to put our house in order first before we start looking at this bit. But the unemployment issue, our own rate of it, we don't even have a data for it. You hear of gruesome killing, you have of kidnapping. You don't hear of those in other places where we're talking about. Those people, their governors can be arrested. There's no immunity. All this kind of stuff, we need to introduce it first before you start saying, let us go to county policing. If you fund what you have right now, if it's well funded and it's well monitored, you will not have this kind of cry for county policing. For state police. All
right, Professor Ogunchakin, thanks. I'm sure this is an issue that we'll return to in the course of the conversation. And just by the way, you talk about violent crimes or crimes against the person. In the U.S., you have seen the issues they are having with gun epidemic. A gunman enters a school, a gunman enters a church, a gunman enters any environment. Last year, you saw what happened in Nevada. A gunman, from a hotel room, shot and killed over 60 persons. So, and yet you have a decentralized policing system in the U.S. But as I said, that's a point we'll return to in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to our Sokoto Network Studios, where retired Assistant Inspector General of Police Yabo is with us. Retired AIG, well, let me refer you again to the opening comment by Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo says that, look, the takeoff point for this is to appreciate the fact that there is dissatisfaction with the current efforts at maintaining security in the country. And this is on account of what is playing out. And therefore, there's been a rise in the clamor for state police. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you very much, Kingsley. I must start by saying that we must always call a spade a spade. It is true that it is that lack of satisfaction from the members of the public that is resulting into this clamor for the call for the creation of state police. However, before I make progress, I would like to correct an impression. Community policing is not necessarily localizing the police. That is to say, for instance, I remember one time I was Commissioner of Police in Oyo State. And there was a matter involving the NURTW people. And they were becoming a serious problem to the general public. There were killings going on and off, and names were being mentioned. So when I was posted there, I was able to arrest the main guy who was causing all those upheavals. And the people were coming around to take his bail. I said, no, I refuse persistently. And because of that refusal, I said, this Hausa-man, what are you doing here, sir? I think they said there's this community policing. Let everybody be policing his own area. So they mean to say that in Ibadan, for instance, only the Yoruba men should be there, should be the police officers around that place. That is not community policing. We're getting it wrong. Community policing means, partnering with the police officers who are around, not minding where they come from, and trying to find solutions to your problems, to your criminal problems. For instance, like I was telling you, there were these killings going on by members of NURTW in Ibadan. And community policing demands that the natives, members of the general public in Oyo State, join hands with the police through meetings, through any other thing they can do together to find a solution. Maybe the members of the public should give information to the police as to the whereabouts of all these people who are perpetuating these crimes all over the place. And by arresting them, the police and the public have partnered together and have found a solution to the problem. So it has nothing to do with making sure that all the policemen in Oyo State are Yoruba men. That's the first impression I wanted to correct. Secondly, I want to say that this community police, this creation of state police, definitely people are not satisfied with what the police do today. But you cannot hold the police responsible for all their inefficiencies today, definitely. Do they have the requirements? Do they have the equipments? Do they have... I was in South Africa for peacekeeping, and I know that what I saw there, way back in 1989, in each police division, there were at least 5 vehicles, patrol vehicles, including a Caspia. A Caspia is a vehicle that is armored, completely armored. It can go inside small rivers. It can go on top of mountains. It has 27 gears, 1 up, 1 down, until you count 27. And you cannot easily use any weapons against it. It carries up to 15 policemen at a time. So have we made provisions for this type of things so that the efficiency and effectiveness of the police is improved? No. Secondly, if we are talking of the provision of arms and ammunition and other, investigative requirements that the police require in order to succeed, you have we have a long way to go in this country. We must, for instance, make sure that the police have the working tools they require to succeed. I was in Port Harcourt one time as a deputy commissioner of police. There was a riot at Ajif by women. Women went naked, and they were preventing the expatriate workers, oil workers, from entering their premises. We went with smoke to disperse them. They refused to go anywhere, man, even after expending a lot of canisters. However, when we went back, because the first plan has failed, we went back to the headquarters and we brought a water cannon. We hit the water to 300%, 300 degrees Fahrenheit. And once a drop of that water falls on your body, the skin peels and you must leave the premises. And that was how we succeeded in dispersing the people and creating room for the expatriate workers to enter their offices. Where in other states, do you have the water cannons? They don't have. I don't think, maybe only in Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt that time, where you have, because they are very, very expensive. How many of the APCs, armored personnel carriers, have you provided to the police today to check all these crimes that are prevalent, including kidnapping, armed robbery, insurgency, all? How many APCs, armored personnel carriers, have you provided to the policemen to be able to enter the premises of these people in the bushes and actually look for them and arrest them? Are they going there to arrest them with bare hands? It's not possible, man, So we must address these fundamental problems of equipment, providing the right equipments, providing the right atmosphere for the police to operate and maintain their efficiency and effectiveness. You can't blame them for what is happening now because they don't have the tools. Even the military are being used now. Have we found a solution to the problem? The military are being used with their gadgets that are definitely more superior to the ones that the police are using. Yet, for the last 10 years, we have been battling with problems of insurgency, kidnapping. They have been on the increase because we have not really given security the desired place it requires in the scheme of things, in our budgetary process. So for now, I think this is what I want to say. And also remember that the state police, remember that during the First Republic, we had the state police, definitely. Even during the Second Republic, in the Southwest, there was the Awolowo policemen, those guys who wear short knickers. Now, the history of torture and human rights abuses have their roots in this NA police system. And that is what the present-day Nigeria police force has inherited from that arrangement. And that is why, till today, we still have traces of this torture and so on. Anything that comes to the police, must somebody be tortured before he will say the truth? Why can't we use modern ways? Why can't we use, for instance, instrumentation in the police? Why can't we use, instrumentation is a process whereby you use scientific aids to be able to know the author of a given crime. If the so-so-so and so-so-so has been committed, then, for instance, take the case of rape. If anybody goes to rape any lady, and if you use the process of instrumentation, there is this theory of exchange of materials. Once you commit a crime, you leave something there and you take away something. And once you are exposed in the lab to all these instruments, they will even see, maybe if it is a rape crime, they will see the lady's pubic hair on your own, glaringly clear on microscopic examinations. So all these things are not there. When you will go on international peacekeeping, we see all these things on the ground. So please, let the government and let the good people of Nigeria provide for the police equipment to enable them work very well. Why are they doing very well then? When they go for international peacekeeping, they do very, very, very well. And everybody, including the developed world, they continue to press us for coming maybe first or the best in any.
No, all right, thank you, retired AIG Tambari. We have to pause you there for us to touch other aspects of this conversation, but we will definitely return to you because you've been there. You have a better understanding of a policing structure and what it should be. We shall come back to you. Now back to Abuja. Let's ask Professor Sumbo this. You know, we are actually talking about effective policing. Can that be done well from Abuja, considering the population of this country growing by the day and the preponderance of crimes of different dimensions that we have started seeing since the 21st century? AIG Tambari talked about equipment that are not adequate, to, of course, allow the police to do their job efficiently. But we're also talking about the numbers. Are you proposing more policemen to be employed, as the president just did last week, add more, and of course go for equipment, or do you think that Nigeria is becoming too huge that may require for us to take a second look at state policing?
Well, first of all, this issue of state policing is a big issue that we cannot exhaust in 1 hour discussion because it has very many dimensions and some of them very complex. First of all, the issue is not about good governance, about governance, system of governance. Governance can by itself is a separate issue and a separate debate as to what government must do in order to bring about good governance, employment, improvement of welfare for the citizens, and so forth and so on. That is a completely different debate. On the issue of policing, again, there are pros and cons of the argument. People hold very strong views for and against state policing. One of them is that the states who, for instance, cannot pay salaries of workers, of teachers, you want that state now to employ, say, 4,000, 5,000 police personnel when it cannot pay the existing workers. What may happen is that whereas workers carry placards to demonstrate, the police will not carry placards to demonstrate, but they know how they will take care of themselves by arresting people, raiding people, and instead of the police being a source of succor and protection to the people, it will then add to their misery and suffering. There is that argument. But taking off from the point which was made by AIG Tambari, which is on inadequate funding under the existing arrangement. That by itself is a call for you to look at an alternative. It means that the current system of funding has failed. And we are all aware of the abuses that have been happening within the police financial arrangement system, which calls for a different arrangement. It talks about lack of tools and equipment. The actual reality of what is happening today is that a lot of the equipment are provided not by the federal government, but by the state governments. As a governor myself, I provided the first APC armored personnel carrier for the police in Edo State. It wasn't the federal government. And in fact, I was on the verge of ordering many more when I left the seat. In terms of welfare of police, I was paying the police quite a lot of money to ensure their welfare. Because if you rely on what is coming from the federal authorities, they will complain that they can do very little. And you want the police in your state to be able to operate. So what happens right now is that in reality, state governors fund the police, federal police within their system. So if they are doing this much for federal police, they should be able to do something for their own police if they create the state police, both in terms of provision of equipment, because right now they provide a lot of the equipment, they buy vehicles for them, they buy even ammunitions for them, of course, through the Office of the National Security Advisor and other security apparatus. So we need more police. We need to come back to your question. Indeed, we need more police. Even at the federal level, the number of personnel has to increase. But in addition to that, we also need more police at the state and community levels. In that way, you ensure that policing is done throughout all the nooks and crannies of the Nigerian society. As obtains, what we are discussing is not, we are not trying to invent the wheel. These models that we are talking about exist in other countries. Even the most advanced, the most developed countries, they have their community policing system. They have their challenges. They are constantly renewing and improving on their system. So in Nigeria, we shouldn't remain stuck in the past. We shouldn't be slaves to the abuses of the past that people experienced in the hands of the native authority police. And again, I will emphasize the fundamental. For me, let me confess that in the past, I used to be a strong opponent of state police. Because I think that on the whole, federal institutions perform better than state institutions. Whether you are talking of INEC, the example which no Nigerian can contest is the relative competence of INEC at the federal level and the state independent electoral commissions. That is very clear. But the fundamental issue is that once we have agreed to operate as a federation, as a federal system of government, and the people in each state elect their governors, elect the members of their houses of assembly, there is financial autonomy. That House of Assembly and the state governor, they pass law for the peace, order, and good governance of the state. They have a responsibility for the state. Why can't they have police to implement the laws of the state? It is just that logic that I think is fundamental, that we say we accept this logic or we do not accept this logic.
All right, Professor Osumbo, thank you very much, as indeed the other guests. I just want to take the privilege of still staying with you to respond to this aspect. There are a number of issues, Kirian, that our guests have raised with regard to what the challenges might be for the establishment of state police and how to deal with it. One of the points that Professor Osumbo you raised has to do with the fact that, listen, how do you deal with a situation where you already have state governments who owe workers salaries, and now you have state police, and you don't pay the police officers? What would you expect the state police officers to do? Might that be obviated, for instance, if you say the payment of state police officers should be a first-line charge on the revenue of the state, just as you have with the judicial officers?
Well, that is a possibility. That is a possibility and a serious one to consider. But again, another issue is that as of now, the appropriation, budgeting for funding of police is only done at the federal level. That's right. Yes. At the state level, the money that governors use may be from the state security vote, not funding appropriation to the state police, to the police in the state as such. So once there's devolution, it all comes down to the issue of, again, true federalism, devolution of power. The issue is that to be able to create state police, you have to devolve policing from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent legislative list. And once you devolve and not transfer that responsibility or part of the responsibility from the federal government to the state, then commensurately, you transfer the resources, the funding from the federal government to the state government. So the state government is not going to incur the totality of the expenditure from its existing pool of funding. There has to be, the federal authorities have to release some of the appropriation that should have gone to the federal police to the state police.
Alternatively, as some persons have also argued, you rejig the revenue allocation formula.
Exactly. That is what it will entail. That is what it
okay,
will
yes. Thank you. Let's return to Professor Olanishake. Now,
Ogun Shaki. Just remember Ogun. Remember Ogun State.
You see, it has to do with sound. Right, Ogun Shaki, thank you for that. Now, your position is well stated, you know, in your initial comment of this conversation, and AIG Tambari and Governor Osumbo. They have also raised a number of issues. Now, we're talking about crimes here. And the major crimes committed in this country are supposedly hatched in the hinterland and is executed in the cities. That is not to say that some other crimes are not hatched in the cities, but a majority of them in the hinterland. And even when people are kidnapped, they are taken down there to the hinterland. Now, we're talking about the number of policemen that we have in Nigeria, the capacity to manage the huge, vast, the huge geographical entity called Nigeria, and of course with some difficult terrains, right? And when the proponents of state police are talking, they mean total security system that can secure the country. Some of the criminals who are operating from forests, for instance in Zamfara, it has been so difficult for even the military who do not understand the terrain to operate and function effectively with respect to combating crime. Now, if we have state police, the argument is that the state police will have a better access to the nooks and crannies of the operational area of these bandits. Is that a good reason to project a state police?
Well, let me make my position clear. There is this bit about being for or against. I'm neither. I'm not against, because if you meet the criteria, the structures are in place, then state police is good. But because we don't have the structure in place, we are not ready.
What are those structures?
And those structures will involve good management, the budgeting, supervision, accountability, the oversight have to be working. Presently, the oversight is not working. And for instance, you go back to that point, you have a position where you have the inspectorate divisions that does not do any inspections. And then when we now talk about increasing the number of police officers, the issue is not increment in the number. What we need to start looking at is introduce technologies that can assist to combat some of this crime. You talk about the difficult terrain. When you look at professionalism, when you look at other countries, you don't have to come from particular state to police a particular. It's about being professional, about being trained, about being given adequate equipment and being trained to use those equipment. As it is now, I will not say that we have the best police in the world, but based on our issues, based on the challenges we face, if they are given more support, then we can go a long way. And it's about support. And the kind of support we're looking at is about resourcing the organization. So they have enough resources. Then the management, the way it's set up originally, you have your zones, you have zonal AIGs, you have the CPs that comes from different areas, but they are professionals. And I think for us, is when you look at the community policing aspect, is when the society, the community, then partner, as the AIG said, with the local police. But as it is right now, you need to fund the police, you need to support the police, and then you need to introduce other mechanisms. It's not just a numbers game. You need to modernize the police. That's the bottom line. Modernize the police, they will do a great job.
All right, Professor Okunshakin, thank you very much. We have, of course, not unexpectedly, a number of tweets that have come in from our viewers. Kieran, let's go through those tweets now, and thereafter we'll take a short break and return to continue with the conversation. Manasseh Musa has this tweet. Now, it's long overdue, according to him. Time to include it, namely, that's state police in the constitutional amendment, except we are not interested in proper policing. All right, Haniku Kenneth says, one disturbing issue about state policing is if it is left in the hands of greedy rulers inherent in our society, it might be counterproductive. And Onoye Victor tweets, our problem is not the population of the police. Policing is gone scientific and professional the world over. It is the attitude to work and lack of patriotism worrying our police. Our present-day policemen, according to him, are traders. All right, and Aminu Inua says, perhaps we may have some irrelevant insinuations regarding state policing, but it is the only remedy. Timothy Adedeji, on a relative level, I'm okay with state policing, but we should ask ourselves the following questions. Are the cabal in the police hierarchy willing to sacrifice their Egunje? Meaning, no more that on the road. Egunje is the greatest challenge in policing Nigeria. Well, Mike Anyako says, the state of policing in Nigeria is not all excellent. Kudos to the Nigeria Police Force on its present performances, despite multiple challenges which the general public doesn't take a look at, but will always condemn the police. No adequate quarters, no vehicles, no superior gadgets, etc. Amino Inoa tweets, again, it says, you may find it amazing to know who are the civilian JTF. Civilian JTF is everybody's task. Thus, state police will bring the vital connection between the police and the society. There is currently a wide disconnect between the police and society. Now, from Festus Akimboyewa, he says, the surge of many heinous crimes in Nigeria and the inability of the federal police to contain these heinous crimes is disturbing. Time to introduce state policing into our policing system, because it appears now to be the only solution to all these security challenges facing us. Dele Jack Solomon, truly, if state police can work in other civilized societies, it can work in Nigeria. But the problem with Nigeria is that when good ideas are borrowed for implementation, the features that make that idea work where it was copied will be negatively doctored to suit personal, party, cabalistic, and even sectional interests. All right, now, Ahmed Gambo Ibrahim, how effective is the federal policing that we are talking about state policing? The mind of our politicians is not matured for all this. Now, Ayola Tawhid Adeni tweets, state policing is a very good idea, but it needs to be checked to avoid abuse. Now, from Aminor, he said our state government we don't provide them with what they demand. And this is from Vincent Udechuku. It says, public expectation is for a policing system that is all-inclusive, that would not marginalize the ordinary man and is not elitist. All right, Ayola Tawhid Adeni, state police is very good development, but needs to be checked to avoid abuse by the state governors. Motola Jabo tweets, now, if you want to solve crimes, you should go back to traditional institutions and empower them constitutionally and grant autonomy to the local governments. I assure you security in our communities will be better. And now, Victor Ohiosumwa, he said, in view of the recent security challenges in the country, the need for the establishment of state police has become imperative. The fear of abuse by state authorities should be taken care of by providing safeguards in the law to check such abuse. Saving lives is more important. All right, Kerry, and those are the set of tools that we'll take in the meantime. We'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation with all our three guests, two with us in Abuja and one in Sokoto.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria. Let's return to our Sokoto guest, retired Assistant Inspector General of Police Tambari Yabo. Retired AIG, again, a number of points that have been raised by the other guests, including your good self. But I just for me to preface my question, you were talking about peacekeeping operation, I believe you said in Southern Africa or in South Africa in 1989. Now, the kind of monster equipment you were talking about would have been obviously during the apartheid years, when, for instance, you had Adrian Vlok, who was in charge of security, and Magnus Malan, who was defense minister. And they were, of course, quite brutal against the black majority population. If it was in Namibia, then that would have been the secret police, the covert, ruthless against the Namibians who were fighting for independence at the time. But here is one point that some advocates have raised. We have seen how increasingly the police force has been upgraded in terms of functional efficiency. Take, for instance, what is now known as DSS, formerly known as SSS. It used to be a special branch of the police force, but it's now become an independent entity. Take traffic control, for instance. You used to have a police traffic department, and you still have it. Out of that, you had the so-called traffic wardens. I'm sorry, this is without necessarily trying to be insulting to them. The so-called yellow fever, according to Fela, when it came about in the 1970s, and on and on. And you have also seen the Federal Road Safety Corps come on board. State governments also have their own traffic control agencies. LASMA came about in Lagos in 2001, 2002. And then you are having this functional efficiency. And people are asking the question, if all of this have happened on account of the increasing complexity of our country and, of course, obviously population growth, as Kirian earlier mentioned, why then should it be a challenge to have state police, in addition to having the federal police, and then properly delineating their jurisdictional competencies?
Thank you very much, Kinsley. Well, I'm not against having state police. I know that there are arguments for and against this state police. All the agencies you have mentioned now that are being created out of the police are being taken care of now by the state. In some cases, even much, much more than the police themselves. Again, before I proceed, I want to go back to Professor Osumbo's comments about governors, assisting the police with logistics, assisting court and uncourt. The main bulk of the work of maintaining the police is being done by the federal government. They buy our uniforms, they pay our salaries, they pay our allowances, they buy even our equipment, majorly. They are the people who provide. I agree states provide pickups, Toyota pickups sometimes, which sometimes, really don't help us because they go a long way in exposing the lives of our people to danger, definitely. The states do not provide the required APCs, armored personnel carriers, that we are talking about, or water cannons that are very costly, or even our arms and ammunition. All these are being provided by the federal government. In any case, sometimes when the governors give you this assistance, they feel that they're giving you personal, as if it is a personal assistant, a personal favor coming to Mr. Mohammed as CP Owari. No. I don't see, even while I was in service, if you give such, I appreciate, because you are helping me to police your own people. You are not helping Mohammed to police himself. So, and the governors use it to demand for special favors from the commissioners of police. Sometimes if you don't give, the end result is that you are reported at the headquarters, and before you know it, you are removed. Sometimes within 2-3 months, you have 3-4 transfers. We have seen it in the service. So That the governors assist, I agree, but the bulk of the work is being done by the federal government. I want Professor Osumbo to take note of that, please. Again, community policing, like we said, there are arguments for and against it. I agree that if you put people who are used to the terrain, people who are used to the cultures, people who are used to the traditions of the people of a particular given place, they know the geography and topography of the area much better than ourselves. When I was in Akwa Ibom State, we had a matter we were going to go and investigate. I don't know how to swim. I'm from Sokoto. So when we entered the enclave, to your front is the sea. To the side are the wings of the sea. The only way to get out is where you entered from. And these people, after we entered, set fire. And there were about 63 of us inside. Thank God that we're having smoke canisters, so as we are advancing for our dear lives, we were shooting these canisters, and that was how God Almighty came to our assistance. We were able to disperse them and come out of the place. So you can see that there are, like I said, always arguments for and against. If you don't, another thing is that if you don't give the police the real training, training is of paramount importance. Now, in this state police you are trying to create, how are we sure they are going to give them sufficient training to be able to handle arms well, to be able to respect human dignity, to be able to respect rights and privileges of people as guaranteed in the Constitution? Are we sure that we are going to give them that training? Otherwise, we may find ourselves in a situation worse than what we have at hand now. So we must be very careful. Maybe we'll have to wait until such a time where that develop, even in the developed world where they're having the, I agree, in a true federal system, there has to be state police, like was eloquently explained by Osumbo. I agree with that aspect. However, I disagree with the fact that you just en masse recruited local police for each local government. You don't give them half-baked people. You don't give them proper training, and then you just throw them into the field to do the police work. You will be creating more problems than you would have solved. I think this is also very important that we look at that situation. Training, very, 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 very important. We just don't take things for granted. Otherwise, we will ever regret delving into an issue that is going to create more problems than we have at hand. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you indeed, AIG Tambari. We are glad you survived that ordeal in Akwa Ibom. That's why I made reference to the issue of understanding a terrain to be able to function effectively and efficiently in any given geographical location. Thank you indeed. Now, back to Abuja here, and I'm going straight to Professor Osumbo. Now, in federated democracies such as ours, so we borrowed this ideology, from the U.S. And in the U.S., we have LAPD and other state police, and of course the FBI, which should be the central police. Now, if that kind of structure, is properly copied and implemented in Nigeria, with respect to state policing system, which many are advocating, would it in any way bring kind of stability in security system in the country generally?
Well, I think what has emerged so far in the course of this discussion is that there's merit in state police, but we have to be very careful. We have to be cautious. There have to be safeguards. One of the persons who sent in tweet used the word safeguards. And we are already seeing that in the bill, which the Senate, I think the Senate it passed first reading recently, whereby they have introduced safeguards in the area of appointment of the head of the state police. I am not ready at this stage to say whether those are effective. The provisions of the bill are satisfactory, but it's an attempt to ensure that the Commissioner of Police, for instance, is not at the beck and call of the state governor, that there are checks. There is overriding oversight by a federal authority. So if there are state police commissioners or state governors that are abusing the system, then there's an authority at the federal level to call them to order. And Dr. Osadolo talked about...
Professor Osumbo, you're giving me a doctorate this morning. Thank you very much.
Okay.
In which area?
You are. In the area of jurisdiction, because that is one area that bothers me, that people are not really talking about. It's not enough just to say create police or devolve the power from federal to state. Having done that, you still have a lot more work to do. How do you spell out the jurisdiction of the federal police and that of the state police? How do you avoid conflict between the federal police and the state police? For instance, in the area of procurement of arms and ammunition, that will remain, hopefully, an exclusive federal matter, because you can't authorize 37 authorities to have the power to import arms and ammunition into the country. So I imagine that there will still be one source of approval, licensing for bringing in arms and ammunition. Is there not going to be a conflict between the states? Supposing the state government says the federal authority is not giving them enough, the license to import enough arms and equipment, there will be problems. But these things can be spelled out. It will take time. It's not something that you just do on the spur of the moment. There has to be diligent planning in terms of the structure, in terms of the management, in terms of operational rules of engagement between the federal police and the state police, and in terms of discipline and training, just as the retired AIG said. So these things are necessary, but they have to be safeguards. They have to be spelled out sufficiently. And if you do this, to answer your question directly, I believe that the system of policing in Nigeria will be enhanced rather than worsened by devolving policing from federal to lower authorities, whether it is at the state level. Even the community policing will be under maybe the state police. And to agree with the retired AIG, I am not suggesting, nobody is suggesting that everybody within the police in the state must be from that state, or everybody in the police in a divisional police station or local government area must necessarily be indigenous of that state. But a preponderance of them would be people drawn from that state.
All right, Professor Osumbo, thank you very much. Professor Ogunshakin, I would like you to respond to the points that Professor Osumbo has raised. Look, in the event that you have state police, this probably are just early days in terms of articulating the rationale for or against the state police. In the event that you have state policing, there are issues you talked about of areas of jurisdiction, that's the competence, avoiding conflict, and what to do with regard to procurement of equipment and so on and so forth. One aspect that I would also like you to take in would just be training. Our retired AIG, Tambari, talked about, listen, are they going to have their own separate training? Will they also attend the police colleges or police institutions run by the federal? Who pays for it, and so on and so forth? Plus, the accompanying penal system. I mean, if the police is not just about preventing crime and protecting society, but once an offense has been committed and offenders are apprehended, where do you take them to? The institutions, for instance, we have now, of course, you have police detention, police custody, but at some point, those custodial issues will spill over to the prison system. Will you therefore also need a consequential reform of the prison system? Professor Ogunshakin.
Thank you very much. One of the two things we need to look at, firstly, is the fact that we keep referring to UK, US. You know, I think we're all guilty of that. But we need to start looking at African examples where policing is good. We need to look at Rwanda. We need to look at Botswana. That set aside. Then the issue of jurisdiction. You have single jurisdiction. You have multi-jurisdiction. Then you have the international aspect to policing. Then you look at the whole criminal justice system, because police is only one element of that system, the criminal justice system. Police is that gateway and the entry point to criminal justice system. And we rightly said about the penal institution. But the issue we have to understand here is about budgeting. You have responsibility. For instance, in UK, in as much as we have different constabulary, we have 43 constabularies. We have jurisdictional issues that is agreed. So we are not saying that the police will become autonomous in the sense that, well, the state will only be operating as a state without having any relationship with the federal. But the point I've been raising is the fact that presently we are not politically matured, we are not technologically matured, we are not anywhere close to introducing state police. The present policing we have, for instance, you have a training department that is a federal training department led by an able DIG who knows what he's doing. Basically, is introducing other aspects of the reform in support of the Inspector General of Police. This is important to the Nigerian police, and what we are asking for is for the Nigerians as a whole to support what we presently have. If they are not happy, satisfied, they need to come out with relevant interventions that I'm sure that they will take on board. For instance, trainings are going on, the promotion training is going on, and as AIG, we support this assertion, is the fact that what we presently have, if it's looked at properly, if it's taken care of, then we will not need to go to state. And the essence of state police, and I say this once again, we already have something like a state police with the police council. But if that works, you will not need this glamour for state police. And what the people on the tweet were saying, and I totally support a lot of what they were saying, is understanding that people are desperate, people are looking for a change. And this is that fundamental error. Just because one thing is not working, instead of you to look at it critically, to diagnose it, to look at where it's not working, you want to go into another realm that you are not even aware if that is going to work.
Prof, I'm not cutting you short, but I wanted to stress on this. You used the word maturity. We're not yet matured. And this word has been repeatedly applied whenever there is mutations for paradigm shift from one system to the other. Now, when can you now know that you are matured? And if you don't start a race, how do you get to the end point? So, I want you to expand on the issue of getting matured to get into a new system.
The maturity aspect is their criteria you need to meet. It's almost like you're going to secondary school. You're going from secondary school to university. You have your entry requirements. You sit for JAM. You go through those. In our own structure, you have people, and I think it's been used, a good example that was put forward is the use of the state INEC share people that are being controlled, and in some states, it's the governor that nominates who is going to become the next, any local chairman or local chairperson. But the idea for us is if we cannot manage that, how can you then bring a police officer that will be at the beck and call of the governor? And we try to stay away from this funding aspect. Whoever pays the piper, basically.
Well, Professor Ogunshakin, thanks a lot. In some of the latter points you just raised, you were returning again to the issues that Professor Osunbo had addressed. To say how, for instance, should you streamline the relationship between the federal police and the state police. The state police is not going to have overall superintendents. And then don't forget, we still have the Nigerian armed forces. So if the security situation or there's a lot of recalcitrance, some persons would argue that, listen, just as you have in the U.S., there's a National Guard. Yes, the National Guard, if a matter gets out of hand, the president calls in the National Guard. That's what General Ibrahim Babangida, as military president, tried to do. He tried to create a National Guard at some point. So these are the issues, but as it's been acknowledged, we can't possibly exhaust all the issues. We have a torrent of tweets that have come in. We'll run through this second set of tweets and then take one or two closing comments from our guests. Usman Bani Kantu Kirian, let's take these ones very quickly. Ordinarily, state policing under normal situation is good, but the major constraint is the issue of neutrality when it comes to discharging their duties.
Now, Chris Simeon says state policing in Nigeria will be a welcome development. Our country presently is facing security threats. With the establishment of a state police, it will beef up the security situation, especially at the local level.
Ibrahim Tudo, it's not community policing we need, but security agencies partnering with communities to solve crimes.
Now, Ortega says state police will help stabilize the current breakdown in security situation across Nigeria.
And then we have this from Kasina Seksu, that's on page 3 of our tweet. It says the money for creating state police that's being used to buy armored vehicles and for the federal police should be channeled to creating jobs, so the police will have less duty or less duties to perform. Ahmed Ibrahim Idris says, well, we've taken one of his tweets because time is on our side now. Yes. Otega, we've taken on Otega. And then we have Uchenna Melody, who says, I agree to the fact that we are not politically mature to have a state policing system in place. So I think the already existing vigilante groups should be empowered effectively to effectively police the nation. All right, this is coming from Charles D. Now, state police should not be armed with ammunition, but equipped with various contemporary gadgets, communication gadgets, to enhance their operational efficiency. And I agree, Simeon, government must be ready to put certain mechanisms in place that will make the agency functioning properly if it is established. This is coming from Joel Femi. Joel Femi tweets, I just want us to imagine how much the state police daily target will be, considering the current police officers on our streets and roads collecting compulsory taxes from commuters. All right, Abilahi Emeka Adedeji says, the retired IG of police has spoken extremely well. Matter of fact, no one has ever enumerated the reasons for the deficiencies of the current police. He says that as much as he has said this morning, we aren't ripe for state police. Efforts should be made to fix the current situation, current system for now. Goro tweets, now, state police doesn't mean that the state handles the policing. The police just needs to re-strategize to accommodate more and communities and cater for their own safety through engaging certain security measures like vigilante. That should be studied and captured. Yeah, Bala Mohud Gaidam, following the ongoing deliberations, one will be made to understand that what Nigeria needs is equipping the police, not introducing any native or state policing. Now, Ahmed Idris tweets, it says, police are the strongest security for any country, but let the federal government give them the necessary welfare and then abide by the laws of the country. All right, I have from Charles D here, state police should mostly work in area of intelligence gathering, community-based policing, which may help the general security architecture in national defense. All right, we have a lot more from Charles D, but let's go very quickly now to Zlatan. Zlatan, that's the Twitter handle. Professor Ogunshakin is right. Modernizing the police and funding it adequately means we are ready for state police. Now, Jonah Uke says state policing will only work when the right policy and structures are in place. Anything short of this will just be putting policing in the hands of state big guns who will use it to foster their interests. Ozemena Obembe tweets, now, federal government should not contribute to the funding of state police. The states that can afford to finance their state police 100% should be allowed to do so. It will encourage others to toll the path of self-reliance. Well, those are the tweets Kiran, those are the tweets that we have. Let's appreciate our contributors and indeed viewers for tuning in. Very quickly, going to our Sokoto Network Center, if we have the connection to retired AIG Tambari Yabo. Well, we are pressed for time, so very briefly. Now, there's often the issue that is raised about what happened with regard to abuses of the Native Authority Police, when, of course, all kinds of persons suffered at the hands of the state police and so on and so forth, and that this might also be the case with regard to state police. But at the time of the Native Authority Police and where we are now, some persons would argue that the rights jurisprudence, in other words, the enforcement of rights, wasn't as acute as it is today. So where there are rights abuses, you can ensure that people will wake up to seek the enforcement of their rights against these state institutions. Is that likely to be any remedy? Very quickly.
Well, I agree that we have gone a long way comparing the First Republic to today. However, instead of even going into litigations to enforce your rights, I think we should not even allow situations like that to arise by, by giving the police the right education to respect human rights, to do those things that really protect human dignity. I think I agree with you that in the First Republic, people were not so developed to know that they have a right to go for litigations to enforce their rights and so on and so forth. But today the world is, even Nigeria, there are lots and lots of improvements, and if you do anything that is not in consonance with the law, that infringes on anybody's right, he can go to court, man, and find a solution to his problem. Before I call it off, I want to make a contribution on the last point made by Professor Ogunsakin, that he was asked, when will Nigeria be, matured to have the state police? I think the explanation one can best give is just by way of assisting Professor Ogunsakin, is that time when the right atmosphere has been created by the government and the right working tools and materials provided, and the police improve their efficiency and effectiveness so that they have people's confidence. When you see those things happening in all the states of the Federation, people are having some measure of confidence in the police, then you can say that we can now begin to think of true federalism. We can now begin to talk of state police. Thank you very much.
And we also thank you indeed, retired AIG Tambari. You've been very strong on this topic, and of course, as a professional, I know you're retired, but I'm sure your ideas about policing did not retire with you. We thank you immensely for your contribution all the way from Sokoto Network Center. We've been speaking with Tambari Iyabu, retired Assistant Inspector General of Police. And here in Abuja, in the studio, we've been hosting Professor Osumbo, former distinguished senator, two-time senator, and of course a former governor of Edo State. We thank you indeed for being here this morning and sharing your thoughts with us on this topic. And the man whose name posed some difficulty to me, Professor Olu Ogunshake. I got it now, right now. All right, okay, thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you for coming this morning. All right. Now, let's now join the Meteorological Agency for the weather outlook for the rest of today.